Well, no parent ever looks at their little kid and thinks that he's going to be a mass murderer someday, or a murderer, period. As a parent, you have all these hopes and dreams for your kids, and then they just let you down. This is a photo of me and Timmy. You know, back when it was just me and Tim against the world. And we were kicking its ass. I look forward every day to coming home to him. You know, I couldn't wait to get home to him. You know, I just want to make sure that he grew up happy and knew that, you know, he was very loved. Made a promise to myself and to him that I would do everything in my power to give him a better upbringing than I had. I was just the average Joe. I wanted him to be special. Somewhere I went wrong.
Use my hands to suffocate my kids.
Who did you use the belt on?
Babies.
Did any of the other children say anything before you killed them?
Gabriel said, I love you.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if there is a God and they do forgive him, send me to hell. And I tell you now, send me straight to hell. Because I don't want to be there with him. I knew damn well in my heart something wasn't right. I never did nothing. Now because of that, 5 children lay dead. I can understand why people look at me the way they do. You know that I raised a monster. This is where we used to go to church. We'd bring my grandchildren, and they loved it here. Well, ever since my grandchildren were killed, I just can't find myself to come back because of what my son did. You know, I struggle to do that, but I came. Everybody's been wonderful here, so there ain't nothing to do with no folks here whatsoever. It's me. I know it's me. And at this point, you know, it's like, I know they're staring at me, and they're not. Well, as a parent of a child that killed his own children, I mean, I find it most difficult to deal with because I question my faith. I question everything now. I never questioned it before. I was overwhelmed because now I knew not only did, you know, I have my son, but now I got to provide him the life that we were trying to do before, but just by myself. I was like, it's gonna be tough. I didn't want him to feel like he was abandoned from me. But more than anything, just to be happy. And I was gonna do my ever-loving best to give him everything he needed. I got on a 3rd shift job to where I would go to work at 10:30, so I would be with Timmy every night to put him to bed. And then I would go to work, and I'd get home at 6, and then of course I'd wake him up, make him breakfast. I would be able to spend the whole day with Timmy when he'd get home from school. So I was with him the whole time, and he didn't know I was gone or, you know, nothing. And so it worked out real well. When me and Timmy, it was just us, I thought it would make a stronger bond. I did. I mean, at that point, I thought everything was perfect. One year at Christmas, I got Timmy a BB gun, and we'd go out and shoot it in the yard, and had little targets and stuff, and it was all fun. We went through all the safety, things that you don't aim it at no one, you don't ever shoot at no one. I don't even want you shooting at animals. One day, I came home from work and walked into the apartment, and I seen Timmy, and he looks at me and says, "It shot the neighbor in the leg with the BB gun." This guy was like 73 years old or something like that. And he shot him right in the back of the leg, and that was real nasty. And when I confronted him about it, I was just like, you obviously knew what you were doing. And he said, do you want to see what it would do if you shot somebody? I was irate, because we had discussed it, but he didn't accept punishment very well. Get mad at me and yell at me. Well, at the time, I thought Timmy was acting out, because he was a young kid and he'd already lost his mother. I believe Timmy always had mother issues. There's no doubt. Just my three boys, with me in front of the Christmas tree. But you could look at Timmy and see that he really wasn't a happy kid at that time. Not happy about sharing me, is the way I always took it. Or being a part of a family, he was very jealous. I mean, he despised my wife. He always was just causing trouble for us. Tim told me that she was treating him badly, that she would make him stay in his room, wouldn't let him come out, and he'd say he was hungry, she wouldn't give him nothing to eat, lying to me. He's just trying to get me to get rid of her, so it's just me and him again. I always try to reassure him that, I'm always going to be there for him. You need a mother figure as well, and he just didn't want nothing to do with it. Timmy was always jealous of his siblings, always. He never wanted nothing to do with them unless I was there. But I would even notice once in a while that he'd get a little rougher with them than he should. And sometimes he would take it a little further than it needed to be. And I always felt that he was sort of doing that on purpose to maybe get even with me or with my wife. Everything he seemed to do at that point was to stick a knife in the middle of it, I always wanted to poke into it. He wanted all the attention. I felt that I was caught between my son and my wife, and I just didn't know which way to turn. So I was caught in the middle of a real situation, really. There was an incident once with a dog, a family dog we had. The sweetest dog. You could even get this dog to growl at you. I mean, she was just so sweet. Well, Timmy's room was in the basement at the time, and the dog was downstairs with Tim. And then I see the dog, all of a sudden it has like a red bloody eye, like somebody had poked it in the eye or something. And I questioned Timmy, did you do something to the dog? He's like, I didn't do nothing to your dog. He seemed pissed off. And I know the other kids didn't do it, because like I said, it had been downstairs and it came up and I had noticed it right away. And so I knew he was lying. And to me, it's just unbelievable, because this dog was just so kind and sweet. And to hit this dog, or poke its eye or whatever had happened, to me was just really cruel. And it scared the hell out of me. That scared the hell out of me. What else does he hurt? Does he hurt any other animals? Are you introduced to your brothers? You know, I'm just like, because he was jealous of his brothers. And so now, looking back then, is like, it's one of those signs of, you know, not good. You're abusing animals. You know, why didn't I raise him right not to do something so evil? I just thought he was a good kid, man. How the hell did that happen? How did this happen? I don't know. As a parent, I think, you know, I mean, it's my job to make sure that these kids, you know, grow up to be good adults, you know, good people. You know. That your kid has killed 5 of your grandchildren. And I still struggle with it. And I always will. Started begging me for a computer, but I really couldn't afford it at the time. But eventually I saved enough money to buy Timmy a computer for Christmas. He was just so happy. I mean, he just decided that, you know, he just didn't give a damn no more. I wasn't happy about it. I was just really concerned about it, and that's why I said, you know, what's your backup plan? And he's like, I ain't got no backup plan. Timmy didn't care what I said. He just really didn't care. I mean, he was gonna go his way, and that was all there was to it. He seemed pissed off. I mean, not just at me, but at the world. The next few weeks, he's just becoming unbearable to live with. Cussing at everybody and just being mean to everybody, being mean to his brothers, my wife. You know, I tried talking to him, but he really didn't want to talk about it. He just sort of shunned me. At that point, that's when me and my other boy's mother, we separated. So I destroyed that too. That was the final, you know, break. A lot of things that Timmy did contributed to the end of the relationship. And I was like, look, what the hell's wrong with you, son? I mean, there's nothing wrong with me. What the hell's wrong with you? And this and that. And he bumps up on my chest, you know, and I push him back. He's like, you know what, you can just kiss my ass. I'm out here. You know, he decides he's gonna go on his own, you know, and I'm just feeling like, you know, because like, damn, maybe I should handle it a little differently or something, you know, but That's all there is to it. It just makes me feel like a failure beyond failure. You know, that I didn't raise the kid, good enough. I don't know why I didn't blame Timmy, but I blame myself. I mean, what did I do wrong? And so it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I hear something in the kitchen, like somebody's breaking in or something. And I go running in there, and this person goes running out the door. Well, now at this point I realize it's Timmy. And so I'm running out screaming, Timmy, come back. You don't have to leave. Come back, come back. What's wrong? Is everything okay, And then I find out he was there to get something to eat, and because he's living in the streets. The dad just killed me. Now at this point I'm worried like hell, And so I think, well, what the hell am I gonna do? And again, as a parent, I felt like I'd let him down so bad. And a couple days go by and I don't see or hear from him. And then I find out, I get a call from the police that they've arrested him. When I talked to them, they were like, well, unless I paid it, I would go to jail or him. I was devastated. I couldn't believe you had done that to me. I mean, it was demoralizing. Not just to me, but to my whole family, because, now everybody knows that all of a sudden this kid that I bragged on for all these years, so now I'm having to put him in jail. All those years of giving up my life, basically, to make sure his life was right, he just threw it away. Well, I blame myself a lot, and I can't seem to get over it. That's when I started thinking back, the thing that kept coming into me is that he was always jealous of the children, but he was changing, and he changed for the worse, not the better. I mean, he was a good, good, clean kid.
A heartbreaking development for you now. 5 missing children from South Carolina have been found dead in rural Alabama. The suspected killer is their father, 32-year-old Timothy Jones.
I can't believe it's been 10 years. Thank God for my wife, Julie. I mean, she at least tries to understand me. Julie is a wonderful person. She's got a heart of gold. I'm not the person I used to be, by no means. I can't sleep. I don't like to be around people so much. I stay in my house more than I ever did before. I feel like people look at me as the father of a murderer and not who I am. Yeah. I would probably look at me the same way. Well, when Tim got out of prison, the biggest change was the religion. He came out with a whole new outlook on life, that he was gonna live by the Bible. He was like, it'll be okay, Dad. Trust me, just watch. I'm gonna show you. I paid my price, and I'm gonna go forward now in my life, and God has shown me the way. I mean, he was just so happy, and I was happy for him. I thought for sure that, this should send him on the right track again. The first time I held Mary Gracie it was like holding Timmy all over again. I mean, it was a great feeling. And the way that baby smiled at me, I mean, all I could do was just hold her and cry. I mean, she was just a little angel. And, you know, looking at my son and realizing that, you know, he's a man now, I was just proud of him and thought, my God, you know, that boy's come a long way. You know, it was a good day. And I'll never forget it. I mean, one of the happiest days of my life, other than my children being born. Well, we're at my house one weekend and, you know, seemed to be having a good time. Jim got a good job with a big tech company. They made good money, so everything seemed good. Amber and Julie are in the back, you know, with the children. And I would try to talk to him about what was going on with him, about his life, and he didn't really want to talk to me about anything. You know, but the religion thing, he wanted to always talk about. We clashed a little bit over it, because he says, Amber, she can not wear nothing but skirts and this and that. And I was like, man, dude, this is the 20th century. What the hell is wrong with you? I mean, my God, son. And of course, I was upset. And then he would get mad at me. One thing led to another, and he looks at me and tells me, you know, I had to just beat your ass. And I looked right back at him and said, okay, now look, son, I love you, but you're my child. As long as I live, I'll never let you hit me. And then he looked at me and told me, you know, I could just kill you right now. The stare he gave me was something I'd never seen before. It was an evil look. To think that my son would say that to me just devastated me. I was mad, but I was hurt. And I was hurt more than I was mad. So I tried to be calm in the beginning, like, you know, okay, you know, look, you know, come on, you know, just be cool, man. But it actually scared me a little bit. And he looked at me real hard and snatched my necklace off my neck. And threw it to the ground. Tim goes and gets Amber and the kids and left. And that day is when I seen the side of Timmy that I never knew was there. That was when I had actually seen the evil come out of Tim. I mean, I truly felt like he was unpredictable. I mean, I really, like I said, it scared me. I knew he was having a little trouble with his marriage. After I saw how angry he got with me, it scared me. I was questioning to make sure that, you know, Timmy was not hurting no one or abusing no one. I'm having Julie looking at the kids and making sure they're good, you know, that they ain't got no bruises or nothing like that. And there was nothing unusual. I mean, after all this came to head, what happened, everything just hit me. You know, it was like, holy why didn't I do something? Because I knew. In my heart, I knew. And I didn't do nothing. And I'll never forgive myself for that. I mean, I knew. When Tim shows up for holidays, literally the minute he shows up, he's got an attitude. And I could see it. He was looking at picking on someone that night. I don't know what it was, but man, it just seemed to go south quick. And I mean quick. And man, he flips. He jumps up, he said, you know what? I know you always loved him more than me and you kissed my ass. I'm out of here. I'm like, what's going on? What? The thing that kept coming into me is that he was always jealous of the children. I ain't staying here no more, you son of a bitch, and, grabs the kids. I mean, they were all crying. I want to try to show these kids the best Christmas I can. Because they're just kids. And then we do all this, and then to attempt to do that, man, was just devastating. This is what Timmy's thing was. When he'd get mad, he would use these kids against me. Just realized that he's not the person that I knew. This was someone else. Coward. A piece of coward that would use a kid as a pawn in your scheme of life. That's just low. Why would you hurt the people that care for these babies? That you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that give their life for them. You didn't get looking at my 3 grandbabies. Natan, Eli, and Mira Gracie. And during this is an Easter photo. You can look at Natan and see that, man, he was like a split image of Timmy. And Mira, God, I love her so much. Right now, she'd be a young lady. And Mira, I used to tell her all the time that she was going to be a ballerina. Because she'd walk around on her tiptoes for hours. It's like, baby, don't that hurt your feet? Nope. I'm going to be a ballerina. And then Eli, he was such an emotional little boy. He was just always so worried that he had to make everybody happy. Oh, God. These 3 little kids were so sweet, so innocent. One weekend, my parents had met Tim and the kids in Atlanta, and my dad comes back to me and says, "You need to fix what's going on with Timmy. Something's wrong." So I say, "What?" He says, "Well, the kids seem really hungry. He shaved all their heads. And son, I slept with my eyes open. He scared me." So literally that evening, I call. Because, again, he's not going to ever do nothing with me again until I call and apologize. And I swore to God I was never going to do it, And after my dad told me this, I call up and I say, "Tim, it's your dad, And he wasn't rude or crude. And he's like, "How you doing?" I was like, "Good, I'm calling to apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for whatever happened or whatever I've done to upset you. I apologize for it. So please just bury this and let's go forward, okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, great. And it's coming up on Labor Day weekend, and so maybe you can come and see us." He's like, "I'd like that. That would be nice." I told Julia, she just happy. I mean, of course, everybody knows what happened after that. Well, the next couple days, we don't hear from Timmy at all. Now, of course, the worry, alarms go off, like, holy, what has he done? And then I told Julie, he killed him. I'm telling you right now, man, I know it. I know it. I just feel it with every part of my body. The police had called me and told me that Timmy had been picked up at a roadblock. And of course, the first thing I asked is, where are the children? And there's no children with him. And I just started, I was working on my bathroom, and I just started beating the hell out of the tile in the room in the bathroom. Because I knew what he did. God almighty, the poor kids, man. Oh, God. It's just so evil, I can't even begin to tell you. You gotta be evil to do something like that. You can't. And it just destroyed me. And it still destroys me.
All right, can you walk us through what happened?
I questioned the town about 4 outlets that he blew. I tried to use more harsh measures to just try to get out of him what was going on. I just PT'd his ass till he couldn't handle it. Squats and push-ups.
How long were you having him PT?
PT like an hour. I come back and find out that he's deceased. And when I find out he's deceased, then the hits the fan all.
How did get the fans in?
And I followed suit with the other 4.
How did you
Said
kill
that
the
wasn't
kid?
my hands. I used my hands to suffocate my kids.
Did any of the other children say anything before you killed them?
Gabriel said, I love you. God, I'm sorry.
If you believe in God so God much, why'd you kill your kids? I don't believe a damn word he's saying, because you're gonna tell me you're crying because you killed your 5 kids. You didn't cry when you killed the first one? How about the second one? At what point do you not say that, oh my God, what have I done? You just continue to go on? And these children are crying and telling you, Daddy, I love you, please don't do this? That just rips my heart out my chest. And it's times like this where if I heard something like this and had Timmy in front of me, I would kill him. You don't get forgiven for killing 5 babies by strangling your own children and watching them, looking in their little eyes. Well, I'll tell you right now, if there is a God and they do forgive him, send me to hell. And I tell you now, send me straight to hell. Because I don't want to be there with him. I remember this photo. Just wondering how time went so fast. He couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. He could do no wrong, He was just a sweet, innocent little boy. Loved me crazy, and this is about the same time when he would reach into my pocket to see what I brought him. Matter of fact, that's probably what he's eating. But he was just so innocent. Can't believe he went from this to what he is now. The police told me I needed to come to the police station. And they're like, you know, you won't tell us where the children are. And so he's like, you can go in there and try and see if he'll tell you. They take me upstairs where they got him in this room, and you know, when he sees me, he's just looking wild as hell. I've never seen this boy, you know, ever. I mean, I wanted so bad to reach over and just punch him out, you know, and scream and yell and go crazy on him, but I knew at the same time that wasn't gonna get the kids. So I just started asking him, you know, just like, easy, son, just, you know, where are the children at, son? And he looks at me and out of the clear blue, he's like, you know, I could kill you right now. He grabs me by the throat and says, I could kill you. And I said, go ahead. You can't kill me, son. You know, I love you. And he just, you know, started crying real hard and let go. It's like I seen Timmy the little baby when he was little. Just scared. Inside, I'm being torn apart. Telling me, look, I still love you, son, but please, tell us where the kids are so we can go get them and, you know, and get them home, please. And he looks at me, he's like, I'll tell you, Dad. I'll take you there. He had to go to prison for killing one of his children. He wasn't going to leave the rest of them for anyone else. He is so greedy that he would rather kill him than see him with me. And that's how I've always looked at this. And I don't think I'll ever look at it any differently. Well, I do feel ashamed because, you know, it's my son. And, you know, and I'm the one who raised him, so, you know, I always feel like part of it's my fault. You know, I've felt that way since day one. I just never thought I'd release a beast like that on society. I really haven't talked to my son, or, you know, I don't write. You know, I just don't. My son will be executed, just a matter of when. So I figure about 4 or 5 more years, and I'll have to start this all over again now by burying my son. And that's why I try to tell people, like, you don't understand, you know, I mean, this kid wasn't this way. You know, he just lost it. You know, I can't tell you why. I mean, I wish I could, I would. But now I'm gonna have to go through the process of killing him. You know, nothing I can do. So, let's deal with that day when it gets there. Then at that point, maybe, I can move forward, but I don't think until he's gone, I don't think I'll be able to. Because of me, and me alone, those kids are dead, because I could have stopped it. Might have had to kill them, but, I mean, I knew it. And to know that your child took their lives like he did, it's just so unsettling and so unforgiving and just so atrocious. You know, that I raised a monster. That's the bottom line. You know, all the work I did, all the time and effort I put in, worked my fingers to the bone for him. This is going to be my legacy, that I'm a murderer raising piece of. And I have to accept that. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I just don't. I just learned to accept it, live with it, and go day by day. Because it's hard to live with. That's just it.
Parenthood is painful. There are no promises. Your children may not.
The desert kept its secrets for 23 years. Out past the edge of Maricopa County, where the pavement breaks apart into cracked gravel roads and dying telephone poles, there was a stretch of empty Arizona land locals avoided after dark. No gas stations, no lights, no traffic except the occasional cattle truck cutting through the heat. During the day, the desert looked endless, almost peaceful. At night, it felt like something alive was breathing beneath the sand. People in the town of Red Hollow used to joke about it. They called that stretch of land the Mouth, because things disappeared there. Animals, cars, runaways, and in August of 1998, a 17-year-old girl named Clara Whitmore. By sunrise the next morning, her bedroom window was still open. Her car keys were gone, so was the silver necklace her mother gave her before sophomore year. Nothing else missing. No signs of forced entry. No screaming heard in the night. Just a quiet house, an untouched glass of water beside her bed, and a fan still spinning slowly against the suffocating desert heat. At first, nobody panicked. Teenagers left town all the time. Red Hollow was the kind of place people escaped from. One grocery store, one church, one diner with flickering neon lights and stale coffee. Half the population worked the copper plant outside town. The other half drank themselves numb, pretending they still had a future there. But Clara Whitmore didn't fit the runaway story. Straight-A student, varsity track, never missed curfew, never even had detention. Teachers described her as careful. Friends described her as quiet, but sharp. Her mother described her using one sentence investigators would later repeat for decades. She always came home, except that night. By noon, the sheriff's office officially listed her as missing. Deputies searched the highways first, then the gas stations, then abandoned trailers scattered along the county line. Helicopters crossed the desert in wide circles, while volunteers walked through cactus fields under 100-degree heat, carrying gallon jugs of water and false hope. Nothing. No footprints. No blood. No car. No Clara. The first strange detail surfaced 2 days later. A trucker heading east on Route 86 reported seeing a silver sedan parked near an abandoned mining road roughly 30 miles outside Red Hollow. Driver's side door hanging open. Headlights off. Nobody around. By the time deputies reached the location, the car was gone. No tire tracks remained. The desert wind had erased everything. That single report became the beginning of a nightmare that would swallow the town whole. Weeks passed, then months. Clara's face spread across Arizona news stations. Her yearbook photo appeared in diners, bars, grocery stores, truck stops. Every mother in Red Hollow started locking their doors earlier. Fathers carried rifles and pickup trucks. Rumors spread faster than facts. Somebody said she had a secret boyfriend in Phoenix. Somebody else claimed she got involved with drug runners, crossing through the desert at night. One waitress swore she saw Clara inside a roadside motel 3 counties away, wearing sunglasses and crying in the bathroom. None of it checked out. Investigators had almost nothing to work with until an anonymous phone call changed everything. September 14th, 2:13 a.m. A male voice contacted the sheriff's dispatch line from a payphone outside Tucson. The call lasted 27 seconds. She's buried where the coyotes cry. Then the line disconnected. No name. No explanation. The operator later described the caller as calm, not emotional, not rushed, almost rehearsed. Police traced the payphone, but found no fingerprints useful enough to identify anyone. Surveillance cameras at the nearby gas station had been taped over hours earlier. That was the moment the missing persons case transformed into something darker, something predatory. Search teams returned to the desert immediately. Cadaver dogs swept through dry riverbeds and abandoned mine shafts while deputies dug through acres of hard-packed earth beneath brutal September sun. Then came another twist. One of the dogs hit near an old drainage tunnel north of Red Hollow. Investigators uncovered a torn strip of denim buried beneath rocks and dirt. Clara's mother identified it instantly. It matched the jeans Clara wore the night she vanished. But there was no body, no remains, no further evidence. Only that single piece of fabric sitting in an evidence bag while reporters circled the sheriff's office demanding answers nobody had. By winter, fear consumed the town. Parents stopped letting teenagers drive alone after sunset. Businesses closed earlier. Church attendance doubled. Gun sales tripled. And still the desert stayed silent. Then another girl disappeared. February 1999. 19-year-old Rebecca Vale vanished after leaving her shift at a diner 15 miles west of Red Hollow. Her truck was discovered 3 days later beside a dried-out ravine. Purse untouched, wallet still inside, driver's window shattered outward. This time, investigators noticed something disturbing. Rebecca resembled Clara Whitmore almost exactly. Same dark hair, same height, same narrow build. For the first time, detectives publicly considered the possibility of a serial offender operating through southern Arizona. News stations exploded. Desert predator? Arizona cold case fears grow. Is a killer hiding in Red Hollow? State investigators arrived within days. FBI profilers joined the case soon after. They built timelines, geographic profiles, behavioral assessments. Hundreds of interviews, thousands of tips. Still nothing solid. No witnesses. No DNA. No bodies. The killer, if there was one, moved like smoke through the desert. And then came the most chilling moment of all. March 3, 1999. At exactly 11:41 p.m., Clara Whitmore's mother received a phone call. She answered expecting relatives. Instead, she heard breathing. Slow, controlled breathing. Then a girl's voice whispered one sentence. "Tell Mom I'm cold." The line went dead. Phone records confirmed the call originated from another payphone 40 miles outside Red Hollow near a highway rest stop. Detectives rushed to the location within 20 minutes. Nobody there. But tucked beneath the payphone was a silver necklace partially buried in dirt. Clara's necklace. The same necklace she vanished with 7 months earlier. When investigators showed the evidence to Clara's mother, she collapsed before speaking a single word. National media descended on Red Hollow immediately after the discovery. Satellite trucks lined the streets. Reporters shoved microphones into grieving faces. Every detail became spectacle. Every rumor became headline material. The town began turning against itself. People accused neighbors. Old grudges resurfaced. Some believed law enforcement was hiding information to avoid panic. Others claimed deputies themselves were involved. One local mechanic became the center of suspicion after witnesses reported seeing him near Clara's neighborhood the night she vanished. Someone spray-painted "killer" across his garage door. 2 weeks later, he attempted suicide. He survived. No evidence ever connected him to the crimes. Meanwhile, the FBI focused on another theory entirely. Interstate trafficking routes. Southern Arizona had long been used for smuggling operations moving through isolated desert corridors. Investigators believed Clara may have witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see, or crossed paths with the wrong vehicle on the wrong road. But again, there was no proof. The case spiraled deeper into uncertainty with every passing month. Then summer arrived, and with it, the discovery that shattered Red Hollow forever. A group of teenage boys riding dirt bikes through a remote canyon nearly 60 miles from town noticed vultures circling low over a cluster of rocks near an abandoned well site. At first they thought it was an animal carcass. Then one of them saw a human hand. Sun-bleached, partially buried. Police sealed off the canyon within hours. The remains belonged to Rebecca Vale. Dental records confirmed identification the next morning. Cause of death could not be conclusively determined. Animal activity and extreme environmental exposure had damaged the body beyond clear forensic analysis. But investigators noted fractures around the skull consistent with blunt force trauma. More disturbing was what they found nearby. A rusted oil drum buried beneath sand. Inside were women's belongings. A hairbrush, 2 bracelets, a driver's license belonging to another missing woman from New Mexico, and a photograph. The image showed Clara Whitmore standing outside her high school gymnasium, smiling directly at the camera. Written across the back in black marker were 4 words. "You should have looked closer." The photograph detonated through national headlines overnight. Panic spread beyond Arizona. Suddenly, this was no longer a small-town disappearance. Investigators reopened unsolved cases across neighboring states searching for connections. Missing women, desert highways, abandoned vehículos, patterns nobody had noticed before. Theories multiplied faster than evidence. Some profilers believe the killer was local, someone familiar with remote terrain and police search patterns. Others argue the offender was transient, a trucker, a drifter, someone constantly moving through state lines. Then another possibility emerged. Someone wearing a badge. The theory came from retired homicide investigator Daniel Mercer, who reviewed the case independently after seeing media coverage. Mercer publicly stated the offender displayed organized law enforcement awareness. He pointed to the erased tire tracks, the strategic body disposal sites, the use of payphones beyond immediate search zones. According to Mercer, the killer understood investigative procedure too well. The statement ignited chaos inside Red Hollow, because suddenly every deputy, every state trooper, every Border Patrol officer became a potential suspect in the eyes of the public. Trust collapsed overnight. Residents started locking doors, even during daylight hours. Some families left town entirely. Businesses died. Tourism disappeared. Property values cratered. And still Clara Whitmore remained missing. Years passed, then decades. The case became a true Arizona cold case legend. Podcasts covered it. Crime documentaries dissected it. Amateur internet detectives obsessed over grainy photographs and forgotten witness statements. Every few years, a new theory surfaced claiming the mystery was finally solved. Every few years, the theories fell apart. But one detail never stopped haunting investigators. The final sighting. A rancher came forward in 2007 claiming he saw a young girl matching Clara's description standing beside a dirt road the night she disappeared. He said she looked terrified. He also claimed there was another person there. A man. Tall. Lean. Wearing what looked like a sheriff's jacket. The witness failed a polygraph examination months later. But the image never disappeared from public imagination. A frightened teenager. A dark desert road. A law enforcement jacket under moonlight. By 2021, most people believed the truth would die buried beneath Arizona sand forever. Then a construction crew unearthed a barrel outside Red Hollow. And everything changed. The barrel surfaced just after sunrise beneath a strip of scorched desert land less than 8 miles from Red Hollow, where bulldozers were clearing ground for a solar energy project. Workers initially thought they had struck old construction debris. Rusted metal was common out there. Abandoned fuel drums. Mining junk. Broken machinery left to rot beneath layers of sand and heat. Then the smell hit. Not strong at first. Just enough to stop conversation. One worker climbed into the trench with a pry bar while another joked about dead coyotes buried underground. Nobody laughed after the lid cracked open. Inside the barrel were bones. Human bones. The sheriff's office sealed the area within 40 minutes. By noon, state investigators arrived alongside forensic recovery teams dressed in white protective suits, glowing against the endless orange desert. News helicopters circled overhead before authorities even confirmed what had been found. Reporters lined the highway shoulder, while residents of Red Hollow gathered behind barricades in stunned silence. Everyone in town thought the same thing. Clara! The recovery process lasted 14 hours. Investigators carefully removed skeletal remains mixed with shredded fabric, fragments of rope, and a pair of women's boots preserved by the dry desert climate. One forensic technician reportedly walked away from the scene in tears after uncovering a small silver ring attached to brittle finger bones. By nightfall, rumors spread through town faster than official statements. People swore investigators found multiple bodies. Others claimed the victim had been buried alive. One story insisted the skeleton was discovered with duct tape wrapped around the skull. None of it confirmed. But fear returned instantly. Not the loud panic from 1999. Something colder. Older. The kind of fear that settles into the bones of a town that never truly healed. 3 days later, the medical examiner released the identification. The remains belonged to 21-year-old Lena Grayson, a missing woman from Tucson who vanished in 2003 while driving north toward Flagstaff. Not Clara Whitmore. Not Rebecca Vale. Someone nobody in Red Hollow had ever heard of. And somehow that made the discovery worse. Because now investigators faced a terrifying possibility. The desert had been collecting victims for years. Detectives reopened archived files across Arizona almost immediately. Missing women, remote highway disappearances, unidentified remains recovered from desert regions dating back to the late 1980s. Patterns emerged with disturbing precision. Young women traveling alone, vehicles abandoned in isolated locations, sparse evidence, sudden dead ends. The same nightmare repeated again and again across decades. Then forensic analysts discovered something hidden beneath corrosion inside the barrel itself. A fingerprint, partial, damaged, but usable enough to enter into national databases. The results stunned investigators. No match. Not law enforcement. Not military. Not criminal records. Nothing. The person connected to the barrel had never officially existed inside the system. That revelation triggered federal involvement once again. Analysts from Phoenix Behavioral Sciences reviewed every known detail from the Whitmore case, the Vail homicide, and the newly discovered remains. Geographic profilers overlaid decades of disappearances across maps of southern Arizona. The center point landed frighteningly close to Red Hollow. Population, 2,700. One diner, one church, one sheriff's office. And somewhere beneath the silence of that dying town, investigators believed a predator may have operated for years unnoticed. The media frenzy reignited overnight. Arizona barrel mystery. Cold case horror returns. How many victims lie buried in the desert? National crime networks aired hour-long specials using drone footage of endless Arizona wasteland while ominous narration described America's forgotten graveyard. Former FBI profilers speculated about organized killers using isolated terrain to conceal crimes. Internet forums exploded with theories ranging from trafficking operations to cult activity hidden near abandoned mining camps. Red Hollow became infamous all over again. And inside the town itself, paranoia spread like wildfire. Residents started noticing things they had ignored for years. Old trucks parked near empty roads late at night. Strangers watching from gas stations. Unexplained lights deep in the desert after midnight. One elderly woman contacted police claiming she heard screaming near her property every August for nearly 2 decades, but never reported it because her husband convinced her it was coyotes. Another resident described seeing a sheriff's cruiser parked near abandoned wells during the early 2000s without explanation. Every memory became suspicious. Every coincidence became evidence. Investigators quietly focused on a narrower theory. Not a serial drifter. Not trafficking rings. Someone local. Someone embedded inside the community long enough to avoid attention. The breakthrough came from a retired evidence clerk named Marie Tolland. She had worked inside the Red Hollow Sheriff's Office during the original Whitmore investigation before retiring in 2008. After watching renewed news coverage surrounding the barrel discovery, she contacted state authorities claiming evidence from the Clara Whitmore case had disappeared years earlier under suspicious circumstances. Detectives interviewed her for 6 straight hours. According to Tolland, several items connected to Clara's disappearance vanished from storage sometime around 2001. Among them were photographs, fiber samples, and audio recordings related to the anonymous payphone calls. At the time, nobody investigated the missing evidence thoroughly because the department blamed poor cataloging systems during a renovation project. But Tolland remembered something else. One deputy repeatedly accessed the Whitmore files late at night. Deputy Aaron Lusk. The name landed like a grenade inside Red Hollow. Aaron Lusk wasn't just another deputy. He was born there, raised there, high school football star, volunteer firefighter, youth baseball coach, the kind of man people trusted automatically. Neighbors described him as polite, dependable, calm under pressure. He also worked portions of the original Clara Whitmore investigation in 1998. When reporters uncovered his connection to the missing evidence claims, news vans descended on his property within hours. Helicopters hovered overhead while cameras captured Lusk leaving his home wearing sunglasses and refusing questions. By the next morning, social media had already convicted him. Dirty cop. Cold case killer. Arizona monster. The sheriff's department publicly denied any formal accusation against Lusk, but behind closed doors investigators began dissecting his entire history. And disturbing details emerged fast. Lusk had repeatedly volunteered for remote desert patrol assignments over the years. His duty logs placed him near multiple disappearance zones connected to reopened investigations. Phone records from 1999 showed his patrol vehicle traveled near the Tucson payphone location hours before Clara's mother received the chilling, "Tell Mom I'm cold" call. Then came the most explosive revelation yet. A former girlfriend accused Lusk of threatening behavior during their relationship in 2005. She claimed he once drove her into the desert during an argument and told her, smiling, "Nobody would ever find you out here." The statement spread across national media within minutes. Public outrage detonated. Protesters gathered outside the sheriff's office demanding arrests. Residents screamed at deputies in grocery store parking lots. Someone shattered the windows of Lusk's truck with a cinder block while his family hid inside their home under police protection. Still, investigators lacked direct physical evidence tying him to murder. Until the search warrant. State police executed the warrant on October 11, 2021. For 14 hours, forensic teams searched Aaron Lusk's property while helicopters broadcast live footage overhead. They dug through sheds, removed floorboards, seized computers, rifles, boxes of documents. Neighbors watched from behind yellow tape as evidence bags filled the backs of unmarked vehicles. Then investigators opened a locked storage container behind the garage. Inside they discovered dozens of items: women's jewelry, driver's licenses, photographs, newspaper clippings about missing persons, and buried beneath old blankets inside a rusted toolbox, a cassette tape labeled simply, "Clara." The discovery stunned even veteran detectives. Technicians transferred the tape immediately to a forensic audio lab in Phoenix. Reporters waited outside the facility around the clock, while rumors spiraled nationwide. Some believed the recording contained a confession. Others feared it captured Clara's final moments alive. 3 days later, investigators listened to the restored audio. What they heard sent shockwaves through the entire state of Arizona. The tape began with static, wind, footsteps crunching across dirt. Then a girl's voice, weak, frightened. "I want to go home." Silence followed for several seconds before another voice entered the recording. Male. "Calm. You should have stayed quiet, Clara." Investigators reportedly stopped the playback twice because several people inside the room became visibly shaken. The recording continued for nearly 11 minutes. Clara crying, wind roaring through open desert, metal clanking somewhere nearby. At one point, she asked a question that haunted everyone who later heard transcripts leaked online. "Why are you doing this?" The male voice answered almost immediately, "Because you saw me." Then the tape abruptly ended. No gunshot, no scream, only static swallowing the final seconds whole. America became obsessed overnight. Cable news channels replayed portions of the transcript constantly. True crime podcasts released emergency episodes. Former profilers called the tape one of the most chilling cold case developments in modern history. And at the center of everything stood Aaron Lusk. But investigators faced a massive problem. The voice on the tape could not be conclusively identified. Audio experts compared it against recordings of Lusk speaking publicly over the years. Similarities existed. Cadence, tone, speech rhythm. Still not enough for certainty. Then another complication surfaced. Lusk disappeared. The morning after news of the tape leaked, he failed to report to work. Deputies arrived at his property and found the front door open. Coffee still warm in the kitchen. Television running. Wallet left behind. No sign of Aaron Lusk anywhere. His patrol-issued handgun was missing. So was his truck. An all-points alert spread across Arizona before noon. Helicopters swept desert highways while tactical teams searched abandoned mining routes surrounding Red Hollow. Federal agents joined the manhunt fearing a potentially armed homicide suspect familiar with remote terrain. Residents locked themselves indoors as armored vehicles rolled through town streets under flashing lights. For 48 hours, nobody saw him. Then came the phone call. A hunter traveling through Ironwood Canyon contacted emergency dispatch after discovering an abandoned sheriff's truck partially hidden beneath camouflage netting near an old mining structure. Inside, the vehicle, investigators found blood on the steering wheel. Not enough to determine severity, but enough to confirm Lusk had likely been injured. Nearby, officers uncovered fresh boot prints leading deeper into canyon terrain before vanishing among jagged rock formations. Night fell before search teams could continue safely. And out there beyond the searchlights, somewhere beneath endless black desert sky, the man tied to one of Arizona's most infamous cold cases had disappeared into the wilderness like a ghost. The canyon swallowed the search teams by dawn, not physically, but operationally, as radio channels filled with fragmented reports, shifting coordinates, and static-laced urgency that made the entire Ironwood Canyon operation feel less like a coordinated manhunt and more like a descent into chaos. The abandoned sheriff's truck became the center of every theory, every fear, every reconstruction of what might have happened in those missing hours after Aaron Lusk vanished into the desert night. Blood on the steering wheel confirmed injury, but not direction, not intent, not severity. No body, no clear trail, only boot prints fading into rock and sand like they had been deliberately erased by the wind itself. By midday, forensic specialists had established one critical detail that changed the tone of the entire investigation. The prints were not running. They were walking. Controlled. Measured. No panique. No scramble. That single observation split investigators into two camps immediately. One side believed Lusk had been wounded and was slowly succumbing somewhere deeper in the canyon system, possibly attempting to escape or hide. The other side argued something far more disturbing, that the absence of panic indicated familiarity, that whoever left those prints knew exactly where they were going in terrain that most people would describe as navigational hell. Helicopters circled low over jagged rock formations while infrared scans mapped heat signatures across an expanding perimeter. Nothing human registered consistently, just shifting desert temperature, collapsing shadows, and occasional wildlife scattering through dry brush. The canyon looked empty, but investigators had already learned that emptiness in Arizona rarely meant absence. At Red Hollow Sheriff's Office, tension fractured into something close to collapse. Evidence from the Lusk residence was being cataloged at a pace that could not match public demand. The cassette tape labeled Clara had already been transferred to federal custody, but fragments of its existence lingered everywhere, in press briefings, in leaked transcripts, in the way officers avoided eye contact when asked about it. The recording had transformed Clara Whitmore from a missing person into something far more permanent inside national consciousness, a voice suspended in time, speaking from a place that still could not be located on any map. Then came the second discovery tied to Lusk's disappearance, one that shifted the investigation away from Ironwood Canyon and back toward the original geography of Red Hollow. A maintenance worker, inspecting a collapsed service road near an abandoned water pump station, found a shallow dugout depression beneath a cracked concrete slab. Inside were three objects wrapped in deteriorated plastic sheeting: a second audio device, a small notebook, and a set of photographs that had clearly been exposed to heat for years but not completely destroyed. The notebook contained coordinates, dozens of them, each one paired with a date, each one corresponding to years when disappearances occurred across southern Arizona. When analysts plotted the points onto a digital map, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. The locations formed a widening spiral that originated near Red Hollow and expanded outward over time, touching highways, desert crossings, abandoned mining camps, and remote service roads used by nobody except those who already knew they existed. It was not random. It was structured, intentional, systematic. The implications hit investigators like a slow realization rather than a sudden shock. Whoever had been operating in this region had not been moving unpredictably through the desert. They had been working within it, using it, mapping it in a way that turned isolation into advantage. The photographs were worse. Some showed empty landscapes, captured at different times of day, as if documenting specific points rather than memories. Others showed blurred figures at a distance, impossible to identify clearly but undeniably human. One image, partially damaged by heat exposure, appeared to show the outline of a sheriff's vehicle parked near a dry riverbed, though the angle and distortion made confirmation uncertain. But one photograph stopped the room entirely. It showed Clara Whitmore, not a school portrait, not a missing person flyer, a candid image. She appeared to be standing in the desert, hands partially raised, face turned toward the camera, expression frozen somewhere between confusion and fear. Behind her, partially obscured by glare and distance, stood a dark silhouette. The image quality was poor, but the posture was unmistakably human. And uniformed. The question of authenticity erupted instantly inside the investigative unit. Was this real evidence or a planted fabrication meant to mislead? Was it connected to the cassette tape, or something entirely separate? Forensics began immediate analysis of ink degradation, paper composition, and digital reconstruction of the photograph's origin layer by layer. Meanwhile, Ironwood Canyon remained active, but increasingly unstable. After 72 hours of continuous search, fatigue began to erode operational efficiency. Teams rotated out, replaced by fresh units, but even new personnel entered the canyon with an awareness that something about the terrain felt distorted, as if the geography itself resisted being fully understood. Then, at approximately 3:18 a.m., a thermal drone operating on the western ridge detected a brief heat signature deep inside a collapsed ravine. It lasted less than 12 seconds, enough to register as human, not enough to confirm movement. The signal disappeared before a second pass could lock coordinates. The search zone shifted immediately. Ground teams moved in under night vision, navigating narrow passages of rock that funneled sound and distorted distance perception. Communication became harder the deeper they advanced, not due to technical failure, but due to environmental interference that operators could not fully explain. Voices echoed back slightly delayed. Instructions overlapped. Directions conflicted. At one point, a deputy reported hearing footsteps above them despite being in a closed ravine system with no accessible elevation paths nearby. No visual confirmation followed. No thermal signature returned. But something had been there. Or something still was. Back in Red Hollow, the discovery of the coordinate notebook triggered a separate line of inquiry that quietly terrified analysts more than anything found in the canyon. One of the earliest dates recorded inside the notebook matched the week Clara Whitmore disappeared. The coordinate associated with that date was not near Ironwood Canyon. It was much closer to the original mining corridor known locally as the Mouth, the same stretch of land where the first abandoned vehicle linked to Clara had been reported and vanished before investigators could recover it. That detail forced a rapid reassessment of the entire case timeline. Because if Lusk was currently missing in Ironwood Canyon, and if Clara's earliest traceable evidence originated near the Mouth, then the operational footprint suggested either multiple actors, or a single individual capable of sustained movement across vast terrain over decades without detection. Neither conclusion was acceptable. Both were terrifying. By sunrise, Federal Command authorized a full grid expansion, redirecting resources back toward the original disappearance zones outside Red Hollow. Helicopters shifted coverage. Ground teams reoriented. The manhunt was no longer confined to a single canyon system. It had expanded into a decades-long landscape of unresolved disappearances that now appeared interconnected in ways investigators were only beginning to understand. And then at 6:42 a.m., another transmission came through from Ironwood Canyon. A single ranger unit reported visual contact. No confirmation of identity, only movement. A figure walking along a ridge line approximately 1 kilometer from the original abandoned truck site. Slow, unarmed posture. No immediate response to radio hails. When the unit attempted visual amplification through thermal scope, the figure stopped moving. Then turned and looked directly toward them. The transmission cut out less than 5 seconds later. All contact lost. When backup units arrived at the last known coordinates, there was nothing on the ridge except disturbed gravel and a set of footprints that did not follow a conventional path of retreat or approach. They moved laterally along the rock face, as if whoever had been there understood exactly how to remain just outside predictable tracking patterns. And carved into the stone near the prints, freshly scraped despite years of weather exposure and surrounding terrain, were 4 words that reignited every fear tied to Clara Whitmore's disappearance, every unresolved theory, every buried contradiction in the case. You missed the start, and somewhere beyond the canyon perimeter, beyond the expanding search grid, beyond the noise of helicopters and radios and breaking news alerts, the desert remained silent in the way it always had been, as if it was waiting for investigators to finally understand that they were not chasing a man through empty land, but following a path that had been there long before they ever arrived. The message carved into the stone, "You missed the start," did not behave like evidence should. It spread through command centers, leaked into media cycles, and fractured the psychology of every investigator who read it, because it did not point forward in the investigation, it pointed backward, toward everything already believed to be known, toward the origin point of Clara Whitmore's disappearance, toward the moment the desert first swallowed a name and refused to return it. Within hours, forensic specialists returned to the ridge in Ironwood Canyon under full daylight conditions, expecting the markings to reveal more under controlled lighting. They found nothing new. The phrase was still there, etched into rock with deliberate pressure, not random scratching, not animal interference, not weather erosion. Tool marks suggested a sharp metallic object, possibly a knife or hardened edge, applied with steady force over time rather than a single violent act. Whoever had written it had stayed long enough to finish it properly, and that detail mattered more than the message itself, because it confirmed presence, sustained presence, not a passing fugitive, not a collapsing fugitive, someone who had control of time and a space where time usually destroyed people. Back in Red Hollow, investigators reopened the earliest phase of the Whitmore timeline with renewed urgency, stripping away assumptions that had calcified over decades. The original missing persons file from 1998 was digitized again, re-examined line by line. Witness statements were re-interviewed, not for new information, but for inconsistencies that had been overlooked under the pressure of the original investigation. One detail began to surface repeatedly, buried in different phrasing across multiple accounts. A vehicle seen near Clara's neighborhood in the days before her disappearance that did not match any known local resident. Described as a dark utility-style truck with no visible markings, often parked at a distance that suggested observation rather than interaction. At the time, it had been dismissed as irrelevant. Now it was being reclassified as potential surveillance. The implication was immediate and corrosive. If Clara had been observed prior to disappearance, then the event was not spontaneous. It was prepared, structured, rehearsed, and that shifted the entire investigative framework from reactive search to premeditated mapping of behavior. Meanwhile, Ironwood Canyon remained active, but increasingly unpredictable. Search teams reported intermittent radio interference that did not match terrain-based disruption patterns. Signals would degrade in open areas where transmission should have been strongest, then stabilize in deep ravines where communication should have been weakest. Engineers described it as inverted signal behavior, though no formal explanation could be confirmed. At 14:09 local time, another breakthrough occurred when a second set of footprints was discovered approximately 400 meters from the ridge inscription site. Unlike the earlier prints, these were inconsistent in spacing, suggesting either a different individual or someone moving under physical stress. The prints led toward a collapsed mine, entry partially hidden by rockfall and desert brush that had not been cataloged in modern geological surveys. This mine was not on official maps, not because it was hidden intentionally, but because it had been erased through administrative neglect decades earlier after seismic instability rendered it too dangerous for industrial use. Old mining operations across Arizona often vanish this way, not physically, but bureaucratically, becoming invisible while still existing in reality. Inside the entrance, search teams found evidence of recent occupation. Not ancient debris, recent disturbance, empty water containers, a torn thermal blanket, a flashlight with intermittent power still functioning, and deeper inside the shaft, a set of markings on the wall that matched the same carving style as the ridge inscription. This time, the words were shorter. She was first. The phrase created immediate division within the command structure. Some interpreted it as confirmation that Clara Whitmore was the initial victim in a series. Others believed it suggested something more specific, that Clara was not just part of a pattern, but the origin of it in a psychological or operational sense. A forensic linguist brought in from Phoenix suggested the wording indicated prioritization rather than chronology, implying that Clara held a unique position in the offender's behavioral framework, not merely as a victim, but as a reference point. That interpretation unsettled investigators even further, because it suggested emotional or symbolic fixation, not just procedural killing, something remembered, Then came the discovery that shifted the entire direction of the Ironwood Canyon search. Approximately 30 meters deeper into the mine shaft, beneath collapsed timber supports, ground teams uncovered a sealed metal container embedded into the rock wall. Unlike the earlier barrel discovery outside Red Hollow, this container was not corroded by exposure. It had been intentionally sealed using industrial adhesive compounds designed to withstand extreme environmental conditions. Inside were digital storage devices, multiple memory drives, each labeled with dates spanning over 2 decades. One label stood out immediately: 1998, Whitmore initiation. The terminology alone forced investigators to pause before even opening the contents. Initiation was not language typically associated with law enforcement evidence. It implied process, beginning, structure. When the devices were transported to a secure federal forensic lab, analysts began extraction under controlled conditions. The first drive contained fragmented video files, low resolution, poor lighting, recorded from an unknown static position inside what appeared to be a vehicle interior looking outward into desert terrain. The footage showed movement outside the windshield, a young female figure walking along a roadside at dusk. Clara Whitmore, alive. The timestamp metadata confirmed it was recorded less than 48 hours before her disappearance was officially reported. But what followed was not a simple surveillance clip, because the recording did not end there. It continued beyond the initial sighting. The camera perspective shifted slightly, as if someone inside the vehicle adjusted position. A male voice could be heard faintly in the background, not speaking to Clara directly, but into a radio or communication device. The words were partially distorted by audio compression, but one phrase repeated clearly enough for transcription. Hold position. She's not ready yet. Investigators reviewing the footage reportedly paused playback immediately after that line, because it reframed everything. If authentic, it suggested controlled observation, staged timing, and a deliberate delay between contact and disappearance. Not abduction in the traditional sense. Coordination. Meanwhile, Ironwood Canyon search operations escalated again, this time with federal tactical units authorized to secure all exit points. The canyon was effectively sealed. Air coverage increased. Ground teams established rotational surveillance along ridge lines and mine entrances. But at 21:37, a thermal drone detected movement outside the containment perimeter. Not inside, outside. Approximately 2.3 kilometers north of a sealed zone, near a dry riverbed that had been inactive for years, a heat signature appeared briefly and then disappeared again within seconds. Operators zoomed in on the last known coordinates. There was nothing visible on the surface, but ground disturbance patterns suggested recent passage. Foot traffic, multiple directions, intersecting paths that indicated movement not from escape, but from navigation. As if someone was mapping the perimeter from the outside while the search continued inside. Command began to realize something deeply unsettling. Every expansion of the search was being mirrored by movement outside it. Every containment strategy was being observed, adapted to, countered, and as night fell over Ironwood Canyon once again, investigators were forced to confront a growing contradiction that no longer fit the profile of a single fugitive, no matter how skilled or familiar with terrain. Because what they were tracking was no longer behaving like someone hiding. It was behaving like someone watching. And somewhere beyond the sealed mine, beyond the ridge inscription, beyond the forgotten desert roads where Clara Whitmore first vanished into silence, the investigation had begun to feel less like a pursuit, and more like an unfolding sequence that had already been written long before anyone arrived to read it. Ironwood Canyon did not sleep that night. It shifted, not in a visible way, not in the dramatic collapse of terrain or sudden weather change, but in the quieter, more unsettling sense that every instrument used to measure it was beginning to disagree with itself. Thermal drones returned inconsistent readings. GPS markers drifted by meters at a time without explanation. Even the wind seemed to change direction in narrow corridors where airflow patterns should have been stable. Investigators started calling it signal drift, but nobody liked the term because it sounded technical, controlled, almost harmless. And nothing about the canyon felt harmless anymore. At 1:12 a.m., A perimeter unit reported hearing movement again near the dry riverbed outside the containment zone. This time, there was no heat signature, no visible figure, only sound. Footsteps on gravel that stopped whenever illumination flares were deployed, resuming only after light sources shifted away. One deputy described it as being followed by something that only exists when you're not looking at it. That statement was never entered into the official report, but it circulated internally anyway, passed quietly from shift to shift like a warning no one wanted to acknowledge. Inside the sealed mine, forensic teams continued processing the recovered storage devices. By now, multiple drives have been partially decrypted, revealing fragments of footage and audio logs spanning years, not just days or weeks. The earliest files, labeled under the 1998 directory, showed structured observation patterns consistent with surveillance rather than spontaneous recording. But what unsettled analysts most was the repetition of Clara Whitmore's presence across multiple files that did not appear to be connected by time sequence alone. She appeared in different contexts, different locations, different lighting conditions, as if her movements had been documented with sustained attention long before her disappearance was officially recorded. One analyst quietly described it as prehistory footage, a term that spread internally because no one had a better explanation for something being recorded before it was supposed to matter. Then came the audio logs, short recordings, often under 2 minutes, each labeled with cryptic timestamps and single-word descriptors. Observation. Adjustment. Wait. The final file in that sequence, however, contained something different. It was longer, corrupted in places, and appeared to have been recorded inside a moving vehicle. Background noise suggested desert highway conditions, wind interference, engine vibration, occasional static bursts consistent with radio transmission overlap. A male voice spoke throughout most of the recording, calm, methodical, as if documenting rather than reacting. At one point, a second voice appeared. Clara's. Faint, unsteady, not fully aware of the recording environment. Where are we going? The response from the male voice was immediate. Somewhere quiet enough to finish. Investigators reviewing the transcript later described a shift in tone at that exact moment, not in the voice itself, but in the way the conversation stopped feeling like surveillance and started feeling like control. Back in Red Hollow, public pressure reached a breaking point. The disappearance of Aaron Lusk, combined with the recovered footage, created a narrative vacuum that was rapidly filled with speculation. Some believed Lusk had been framed. Others insisted he had been hiding in plain sight for years. A third group, growing louder each day, claimed he was never acting alone. That theory gained traction after a retired communications engineer reviewed leaked fragments of the mine recordings and identified anomalies in background audio patterns. According to his analysis, some of the static bursts matched frequencies used by older law enforcement radio systems that had been phased out in the early 2000s but were still operational in modified form for certain state patrol units. That observation reopened an uncomfortable question investigators had been avoiding. If the recordings were authentic, and if they spanned multiple years, then the operational window of the activity overlapped with multiple generations of law enforcement infrastructure in Arizona, which meant either the system had failed to detect something operating within it, or it had been unable to act on what it already knew. At 3:44 a.m., Ironwood Canyon experienced its most significant anomaly yet, a full blackout across 3 independent drone networks. Not simultaneous failure. Sequential, one after another dropping offline within a 40-second window. Backup systems activated immediately, but by the time coverage was restored, the canyon floor below the northern ridge had changed. A section of terrain previously mapped as stable rock now showed evidence of disturbance. Fresh displacement of gravel and dust patterns suggested movement of a large object or vehicle through an area that had been considered inaccessible. Ground units were deployed immediately, moving in under minimal lighting conditions to avoid detection or interference. What they found was not a body, not a vehicle, but a structure, partially buried, concrete reinforcement emerging from sand like something trying to surface after decades underground. Entrance markings indicated it had once been part of an auxiliary mining operation, likely used for storage or equipment housing, then sealed and abandoned without formal documentation. The entry had been reopened, Recently, inside, the air was colder than expected, despite desert conditions above ground. Walls showed signs of recent scraping, as if something had been removed or transported out rather than left behind. And on the interior wall near the entrance, written in faded but still visible ink, were multiple names. Some identified, some redacted, some crossed out entirely. Among them, one name appeared repeatedly in different handwriting styles, as if written at different times by different hands focusing on the same subject. Clara Whitmore. At the base of the list, beneath all other markings, was a final line that appeared more recent than everything else, its ink still slightly reflective under flashlight beam. Not a missing person, a reference point. That phrase triggered immediate escalation of the case classification. Federal Command redefined operational status from missing persons investigation to multi-jurisdictional behavioral pattern analysis. Entire teams were reassigned. Data analysts began reconstructing timelines not around disappearance events, but around interaction points. Because the implication was no longer that Clara Whitmore had been taken. It was that her disappearance had been used as structure, as anchor, as beginning. Meanwhile, Aaron Lusk's status remained unchanged. Missing, presumed armed, potentially injured, last confirmed sighting in Ironwood Canyon perimeter zone. But investigators were now less focused on locating him alive or dead and more concerned with what his disappearance represented in the broader pattern. Because every new discovery was no longer clarifying the case. It was expanding it, and expansion meant something had been contained poorly from the start. At 5:58 a.m., just before dawn began to fracture the horizon, a final transmission came through from a remote perimeter unit station near the canyon's western edge. The operator reported visual contact, not with a person, with something far more ambiguous. A series of footprints emerging from the desert floor, leading directly toward the containment boundary. They did not follow terrain logic. They crossed elevation inconsistencies without deviation, moved in straight lines where movement should have been obstructed, and converged at a single point approximately 50 meters from the perimeter fence. Then stopped. No continuation. No retreat. Just cessation. When ground units arrived minutes later, they found nothing at the convergence point except a shallow indentation in the sand and a single object partially buried beneath it. A cassette tape, unlabeled, still intact. And as the first light of sunrise hit Ironwood Canyon, investigators stood in silence around evidence that no longer felt like discovery, but like continuation, as if the desert itself had finally decided to return something it had been holding on to since the beginning, not to answer questions, but to ensure the questions were never allowed to end. The cassette arrived at the mobile forensic unit like an artifact that did not belong to any timeline investigators were currently working within, as if it had been placed there not by recent human movement, but by a longer sequence of decisions stretching back into the earliest days of the Whitmore case. No fingerprints were found on its surface, only fine grains of desert sand embedded into the plastic seams, the kind that gets into everything out there and never fully leaves. When technicians opened the protective casing, the tape inside was still intact, surprisingly preserved despite years of heat cycles and sand abrasion. There was no label, no handwriting, no identifying mark of ownership, only a faint scratch along one edge, as if it had been handled repeatedly before being placed where it was found. The playback began under controlled conditions in a sealed audio lab in Phoenix, with federal analysts, state investigators, and forensic audio specialists all present. The room was quiet in the way that only rooms filled with people expecting something irreversible can be quiet. At first, there was nothing but static, then wind. Not artificial noise, not tape degradation, but actual environmental sound captured at the source. A desert wind moving through open space, uninterrupted, unfiltered. Then footsteps, slow, measured, and then a voice, male, calm in a way that immediately separated it from the panic, distortion, or fragmentation typical of cold case audio evidence. "This is not the beginning," the voice said. "This is what was left after you stopped looking properly." No one in the room spoke. The recording continued. There was no disappearance. There was placement. There was observation. There was sequence. The phrasing alone caused one analyst to pause the playback briefly. Sequence was not language commonly used in criminal confessions. It implied structure, process, intent beyond singular events. When the recording resumed, a second sound entered. Breathing. Soft. Controlled. Human. Clara Whitmore. Her voice was unmistakable to the investigators who had reviewed every known audio fragment tied to her case for decades. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said. A long pause followed. Then the male voice responded, "Because understanding was never required." The tape continued for several minutes, alternating between silence, environmental noise, and fragmented dialogue. At one point, Clara's voice grew clearer, stronger, as if closer to the recording device. "You said I could go home. That was conditional." "What condition?" No immediate response. Only wind. Then, finally, "that you never saw the pattern." The recording abruptly shifted tone after that moment. The environmental sound changed from open desert wind to enclosed acoustics, suggesting a transition from exterior to interior space. Metallic echoes appeared in the background. Something moving. Something being adjusted. Then another voice entered the recording, briefly, overlapping with the male voice in a way that suggested proximity rather than distance. This voice was different from Clara's. Older. Unidentified. "It's already expanding," it said. The male voice responded almost immediately. "Then it's working." The recording ended without warning. No conclusion. No resolution. Only silence returning as abruptly as it had been replaced. In the lab, nobody moved for several seconds after playback stopped. The kind of silence that follows something not fully understood but instinctively recognized as significant. Then the questions began. Where had the tape been recorded? When had it been recorded? And most importantly, how many recordings like this still existed, undiscovered, buried, or waiting in other locations across the desert? Meanwhile, Ironwood Canyon had entered a new operational phase. After the cassette discovery, containment strategy shifted again, this time focusing not just on search and capture but on reconstruction of movement patterns leading out from the canyon perimeter. Analysts began mapping every confirmed and suspected location associated with Aaron Lusk's last known activity, overlaying them with older disappearance sites linked to Clara Whitmore and other victims. What emerged was not random clustering. It was directional flow, a path that did not spiral outward anymore, but instead appeared to converge inward toward a central region that had been repeatedly overlooked due to administrative boundary assumptions. That region was Red Hollow itself, not the canyon, not the mining corridors, the town. At first, the idea was dismissed as coincidental overlap, but as more data layers were added, including historical patrol routes, archived communication logs, and environmental access maps from defunct mining operations, the convergence became undeniable. Multiple independent lines of activity pointed back toward Red Hollow as a central operational node. Not origin in a criminal sense, but anchor. The realization caused immediate internal disruption among investigators, because it meant that every search conducted outward into the desert had potentially been moving away from the true focal point of activity rather than toward it. And that meant years of investigative direction may have been fundamentally inverted. Back in Red Hollow, residents began noticing increased law enforcement presence in ways that were no longer subtle or procedural. Surveillance vehicles positioned at town entry points, unmarked cars rotating through residential streets, temporary checkpoints established without public announcement. Official statements remained vague, citing ongoing regional coordination efforts, but locals understood the shift in tone. Something had changed. The investigation was no longer distant. It was inside. One of the earliest indicators of that shift came when investigators requested access to archived municipal utility records dating back to the late 1990s. At first glance, the request seemed unrelated, but analysts were now looking for something more structural than behavioral. Access points, service disruptions, subterranean modifications, anything that might suggest long-term environmental manipulation beneath or around populated zones. That request led to an unexpected discovery: a sealed maintenance tunnel system beneath the northern sector of Red Hollow that had never been fully documented in public infrastructure records. Originally constructed during mining expansion decades earlier, the tunnels had been partially repurposed for utility routing before being officially decommissioned due to instability concerns. However, incomplete closure procedures meant portions of the system remained physically accessible. And according to newly recovered schematics, several sections of the tunnel network extended far beyond what was publicly acknowledged, connecting indirectly to abandoned mining corridors leading toward both Ironwood Canyon and the mouth. The implication was immediate and unsettling. There were hidden pathways under the region that had never been fully sealed, paths that could allow movement between disappearance zones without surface detection, paths that, until now, had never been considered in any official search model. As investigators prepared to deploy subterranean teams for verification, another report arrived from Ironwood Canyon that shifted urgency back into the field. A surveillance unit station near the western perimeter had detected movement beneath the surface, not above ground. Below, ground-penetrating radar showed irregular voids forming in a pattern inconsistent with natural erosion or geological collapse. Instead, the voids appeared structured, linear, and connected, resembling passageways rather than random cavities. When compared against newly discovered tunnel schematics from Red Hollow, alignment was confirmed in multiple segments. The system was connected, somehow, across miles of desert that were assumed to be empty, isolated, and unlinked. And then came the final message of the night, recovered from a low-band radio frequency that had been dormant for years, but briefly activated for less than 12 seconds. No origin point could be immediately established. Only a single recorded phrase. "You are inside it now." The transmission ended. And for the first time since the case began, investigators stopped thinking about where the subject was moving, and started considering whether movement itself had been the wrong concept entirely from the very beginning. The phrase, "You are inside it now," did not behave like a typical transmission. It spread through secure channels, replayed itself in briefing rooms, echoed through forensic labs, and settled into every corner of the investigation like an intrusion that couldn't be isolated or deleted. Engineers attempted to trace its origin again, rerunning frequency scans, cross-referencing signal decay patterns, triangulating atmospheric interference data, but every model returned the same conclusion. The message had no stable point of origin. It was as if it had been broadcast from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. In Red Hollow, that uncertainty translated into something more immediate than theory. Fear became spatial. People stopped thinking about the case as something happening out there in the desert. Instead, it became something mapped across their own streets, their own infrastructure, their own foundations. The town began to feel like it was no longer sitting beside the investigation, but sitting inside it. At 2:03 a.m., federal teams authorized a full subterranean sweep of the newly discovered tunnel network beneath the northern sector. Entry points were secured under armed supervision, and specialized units descended through maintenance shafts that had not been fully accessed in over 2 decades. The air underground was colder than expected, carrying a dry metallic scent that clung to equipment and clothing within minutes. Lighting systems revealed corridors that were not on any modern map. Concrete walls marked with outdated utility codes, sections reinforced and then abandoned mid-construction. Some passages ended abruptly in sealed bulkheads, while others opened into branching pathways that seemed to contradict original architectural intent. And yet, the deeper the teams moved, the more consistent the structure became. Not random excavation, not collapsed mining remnants, a deliberate network. At approximately 420 meters from the primary entry point, one team encountered a junction chamber that immediately changed the tone of the entire operation. Unlike the surrounding tunnels, this space showed signs of maintenance. Dust patterns had been disturbed recently. Equipment had been moved. A small generator sat in the corner, still warm to the touch despite being unplugged. On the far wall, investigators found something unexpected. A hand-drawn map. Not technical schematics, not engineering blueprints. A spatial diagram of Red Hollow and surrounding desert terrain, annotated with dates, symbols, and movement lines connecting multiple known disappearance sites. The map was layered, with older markings partially overwritten by newer additions, suggesting continuous revision over time. At the center of it all was a single marked point labeled only with a circle and no text. When analysts overlaid the diagram with known case data, the convergence point aligned not with Ironwood Canyon, not with the mouth, but directly beneath the town's central civic zone. The implication was no longer theoretical. The system was not surrounding Red Hollow. It was under it. Meanwhile, in Ironwood Canyon, surface operations were temporarily paused due to escalating subterranean anomalies detected across multiple sensor grids. Ground-penetrating radar continued to register shifting void structures beneath previously stable terrain, but the most disturbing detail was not their existence, it was their movement. The voids were changing position, slowly, but measurably, as if something underground was reorganizing itself in response to the surface activity. At 3:41 a.m., a seismic monitoring station recorded a low-frequency vibration that lasted approximately 9 seconds. It was not consistent with tectonic activity or mining collapse. The pattern resembled controlled displacement, like something large moving through pre-formed channels beneath the earth. When cross-referenced with tunnel mapping data from Red Hollow, the vibration trajectory aligned with one of the newly discovered subterranean corridors. A direct connection had been confirmed. Field commanders escalated containment protocols immediately. But even as surface teams prepared for expanded excavation, something unexpected occurred inside the tunnel network beneath Red Hollow. A surveillance unit reported a sudden loss of communication with one of their forward teams. No distress signal, no equipment failure alert, just silence. Within seconds, thermal imaging confirmed that the missing unit's heat signatures had vanished entirely from a closed corridor with no known exits. Backup units were deployed immediately to their last confirmed position. What they found was not debris, not evidence of struggle, only equipment arranged in a precise line along the tunnel floor. Flashlights still on, body cameras still recording, but no operators present. The footage retrieved from one of the cameras showed the team advancing normally until a point where the corridor ahead appeared visually unchanged. No collapse, no obstruction, no anomaly. Then, according to the video, every member of the unit stopped simultaneously, as if receiving instruction. One of them raised a hand toward the wall. The camera feed distorted briefly, and then all movement ceased. The recording continued for another 12 minutes of static before ending. In command centers above ground, panic escalated rapidly. Not because of what had been lost, but because of what had been observed. There was no evidence of force, no evidence of evacuation, no visible threat, only coordinated absence. And coordination implied awareness. At 5:12 a.m., a second discovery was made deeper within the tunnel system beneath Red Hollow. This time, a sealed chamber embedded within reinforced concrete walls, accessed through a narrow passage that had been deliberately concealed behind structural false panels. Inside the chamber were multiple recording devices arranged in a circular formation, all facing inward toward an empty central space. When activated remotely, each device played a synchronized segment of audio. Different voices, different timestamps, but identical structure, observations, adjustments, delays, and in every sequence, one recurring phrase that had now appeared across multiple layers of the investigation in different forms, contexts, and locations. She is the reference. Investigators reviewing the synchronized playback noted something else. A subtle background pattern in the audio, consistent across all recordings. A low-frequency hum, not mechanical, not environmental, but rhythmic, like something operating continuously beneath the surface of the entire network. At the same time, in Ironwood Canyon, surface radar detected a new structural anomaly forming beneath the northern ridge, this time not a void, but a density increase. Something solid moving into position underground, displacing surrounding Earth in a way that suggested intentional relocation rather than natural formation. Command attempted to isolate the region again, but before containment could be adjusted, a final transmission was received from a stationary ground unit positioned closest to the anomaly. The operator's voice was calm. Too calm. "Something is passing under us," he said. A pause followed, then quieter. "And it knows we are here." The transmission ended. Moments later, all seismic activity across both Ironwood Canyon and Red Hollow synchronized for the first time since monitoring began. Sensors recorded a unified pattern of movement beneath both locations simultaneously, as if separate systems had finally aligned into a single operational structure. And in that moment, investigators understood something they had not been able to articulate before. They were not tracking a person. They were tracking a system that had been active long before they ever identified its edges. A system that did not move through the desert. A system that used the desert. And somewhere beneath the intersecting tunnels, beneath the abandoned mines, beneath the town of Red Hollow itself, the name Clara Whitmore stopped functioning as a missing person case entirely, and became the point where everything else had begun. The synchronization of seismic activity did not fade after the initial spike. It stabilized. That was the part no one liked admitting. Natural systems spike, then decay. Aftershocks diminish. Interference clears. Signals degrade. But what the instruments recorded across Ironwood Canyon and beneath Red Hollow was not decay. It was maintenance. A sustained, low-frequency alignment that held steady for nearly 7 minutes before shifting into a new configuration entirely. Analysts later described it as a system choosing to remain active. That language never made it into official press briefings. In the field, however, there was no room left for euphemism. Subterranean teams beneath Red Hollow were ordered to halt forward movement and establish fixed observation points. Every corridor, every junction, every sealed chamber was now considered potentially interconnected. The priority was no longer exploration, it was mapping behavior. And behavior, at this stage, was no longer human-readable. At 6:19 a.m., one of the stationary units reported a change in environmental conditions inside the tunnel system. Temperature readings began to rise slightly, not enough to suggest geothermal activity, but enough to register as anomalous in a structure that should have remained thermally static. Then came the sound, not through microphones, through vibration sensors embedded in the tunnel walls. A pulse, slow, evenly spaced, like something moving far below the current excavation layer, passing beneath the entire network rather than through it. One technician whispered over comms that it sounded like something turning over in its sleep. No one corrected him, because no one had a better description. Above ground, Red Hollow had entered a state of controlled shutdown. Civilian movement was restricted under the guise of regional safety enforcement. Schools were closed. Non-essential traffic was halted. Utility crews were quietly rerouting access to underground infrastructure points identified during tunnel mapping operations. The town was no longer just adjacent to the investigation. It was structurally inside it. At the federal command post, a new composite map was projected across the main screen. Layers of data overlapped in real time. Ironwood Canyon void structures, Red Hollow tunnel networks, historical mining routes, disappearance sites, and signal interference zones. Each layer had previously been treated as separate phenomena. Now they were collapsing into one continuous system. A senior analyst identified the pattern first, but hesitated before speaking it aloud. When he finally did, the room went silent. "It's not a network," he said. "It's a perimeter." The distinction mattered. A network connects points. A perimeter contains them. And if Red Hollow was inside that perimeter, then every movement, every disappearance, every signal, every recovered artifact was not evidence of scattered events, but of controlled boundaries. At 7:04 a.m., a new file was decrypted from one of the earlier recovered devices linked to the mine chamber beneath Ironwood Canyon. Unlike previous recordings, this one contained no environmental audio, no voices, no visible movement. Only a static image, a still frame. It showed a tunnel interior, empty, but centered in the frame was something that had not been noticed during initial review. A marking on the wall. Fresh, not weathered, not historical, new. It was a simple arrangement of symbols repeated across multiple layers of investigation in different contexts, ridge inscriptions, tunnel maps, audio logs. But now it appeared isolated, deliberate, as if placed for visibility rather than concealment. When enhanced, the symbols resolved into text. Not escape, alignment. The phrase triggered immediate reassessment of operational assumptions. Until that point, investigators had treated movement through the system as either escape behavior or concealment behavior. This introduced a third possibility. That movement itself was not the objective. Alignment was. Back in Ironwood Canyon, ground units reported a second anomaly beneath the western perimeter. Unlike previous void formations, this one registered as a dense vertical structure extending downward beyond current sensor range. When cross-referenced with Red Hollow tunnel schematics, It aligned with a junction point that had been marked in multiple recovered maps but never physically located. The same central circle. The reference point. Clara Whitmore. At 8:11 a.m., communications from one of the forward observation teams became unstable. Audio channels filled with overlapping transmissions from different units despite operating on isolated frequencies. Operators reported hearing their own voices repeated back to them through unknown channels, speaking words they had not consciously said. Then, all channels synchronized briefly, and every active unit across both Ironwood Canyon and Red Hollow received the same incoming transmission. Not audio, not visual. A text-only system message appearing simultaneously across multiple devices. It read, "Observation complete." For nearly 10 seconds after that message appeared, no one issued commands. No one moved. The system itself felt suspended, as if awaiting confirmation of interpretation. Then the underground sensors activated again. But this time, the movement pattern changed. Instead of lateral shifts or localized displacement, the entire mapped structure, canyon voids, tunnel networks, subterranean chambers, registered a unified directional movement toward a single convergence zone. Not physically traveling, reorienting, as if the system had been recalibrated around a central axis. Command analysts attempted to isolate the cause, but before any corrective action could be implemented, a final set of data arrived from a sensor array positioned deep beneath Red Hollow's central civic zone. The readings were stable, too stable, perfectly symmetrical, and at the exact center of that symmetry, a single point of zero fluctuation had formed. A fixed node. When overlaid with all prior mapping layers, it matched every previous reference point labeled across years of investigation. The origin of observation patterns, the center of movement alignment, the repeated coordinates found in Aaron Lusk's notebook, the focal point of ridge inscriptions, the structural core beneath the tunnel network. And when labeled on the composite system map, it required no interpretation. It was already named. Clara Whitmore. At that moment, the investigation stopped behaving like a search operation entirely. Because everything being observed, signals, voids, tunnels, recordings, movement patterns, had ceased to behave like scattered evidence. They were functioning as responses. And for the first time since the case began, investigators were forced to consider a possibility no one had been willing to articulate. That Clara Whitmore was not at the center of a missing persons case, but at the center of something that had been watching the entire investigation unfold from the beginning, adjusting only when necessary, and now, with all systems aligned, no longer required concealment at all. T8:17 a.m., the system did something it had never done before. It stopped hiding. Across Ironwood Canyon and beneath Red Hollow, every active sensor array, thermal, seismic, acoustic, and ground penetrating, shifted into a unified state of resolution. Data streams that had previously required cross-referencing now aligned automatically, as if the infrastructure itself had decided to consolidate interpretation into a single output. Analysts watched in real time as maps re-render themselves without human input. Not redrawn, rewritten. The tunnel networks beneath Red Hollow were no longer displayed as fragmented utility corridors or abandoned mining remnants. They appeared as continuous pathways, perfectly integrated with the void structures beneath Ironwood Canyon. The desert, once mapped as empty space between two unrelated sites, now resolved into a single connected system stretching across miles of terrain. And at the center of that system, the same fixed node remained unchanged. Clara Whitmore. No one spoke for several seconds. The name on the screen did not feel like a label anymore. It felt like a coordinate that everything else had been built around. Then the first alert came in. A seismic pulse originating from the central node. But it was not a movement outward. It was inward, everything converging. At the Red Hollow Tunnel Command Post, operators reported sudden pressure changes in lower chambers. Doors that had remained stable for decades began to vibrate subtly, not collapsing, not cracking, but responding to something moving through adjacent structural layers. One technician described it as the building remembering something it was designed to forget. That statement was not recorded in official documentation, but it circulated through internal channels within minutes. At 8:29 a.m., Ironwood Canyon experienced a complete inversion of thermal mapping data. Areas previously marked as voids now registered density. Areas marked as solid terrain began to show hollow signatures. The system was not losing accuracy, it was reversing perspective. It was as if the entire subterranean model had been turned inside out. And still, the central node remained stable, unmoved, unchanged. At 8:41 a.m., a breakthrough occurred beneath Red Hollow when a forward exploration unit reached a junction chamber that had not appeared on any prior map layer. The chamber was circular, reinforced with older concrete construction methods, and contained no visible entry points other than the one they had used to access it. Inside, the air was warmer and quieter, too quiet. The chamber walls were covered in overlapping markings, some etched, some painted, some carved into layers of dust and mineral residue. Unlike previous inscriptions, these were not isolated phrases. They formed continuous sequences, wrapping around the room in a spiral pattern that mirrored the system map observed earlier. In the center of the chamber was a shallow depression in the floor, perfectly circular, freshly disturbed. No equipment, no remains, no artifacts, just absence. When a survey drone was lowered into the depression, its signal cut out instantly. No recovery, no transmission failure alert, just disappearance. Command units began to reassess whether the technology itself was being selectively interrupted. But even that theory failed to fully explain the consistency of signal loss patterns, which always occurred in proximity to the same map convergence zones. Then came the second message, this time not from sensors, but from every active display terminal connected to the investigation network. The screen briefly flickered, then displayed a single sentence. You have arrived correctly. At Ironwood Canyon, the reaction was identical. Every active monitor, every drone feed, every field tablet flashed the same message simultaneously. No origin point, no transmission signature, no network breach detected, just uniform presence across all systems, as if the system had acknowledged them. At 9:03 a.m., Field Command ordered immediate evacuation protocols for all subterranean units. But before extraction could be completed, communication from the deepest tunnel section beneath Red Hollow abruptly stabilized into perfect clarity. A single live audio feed activated. No static, no interference. Just voice, male, calm, familiar in tone, though not immediately identifiable. You built your search outward, the voice said, so you would not notice it closing in. Pause. Then. Red Hollow was never the center. It was the threshold. Operators attempted to triangulate the source, but every attempt returned identical coordinates, each one pointing to the central node beneath the civic zone. The same fixed location. The same impossible stability. Then a second voice entered the transmission. Faint. Female. Recognizable. Clara Whitmore. I didn't disappear, she said. Another pause. Longer this time. I was placed where everything could be seen. At that exact moment, every seismic sensor across both regions registered a synchronized drop in activity. Not silence. Resolution. As if all motion had reached completion. Command analysts began to understand the implication forming in the data. Everything that had been considered a disappearance event was not random movement through geography. It was calibration. Each site, Ironwood Canyon, the mouth Red Hollow tunnels, had functioned as a layer in a larger structural system that had been adjusting over decades, responding not to pursuit, but to observation. And now that observation had reached full coverage, the system no longer needed to shift. Because it was complete. At 9:18 a.m., the central node beneath Red Hollow registered its final change. A structural alignment event occurred across all mapped layers simultaneously. Ground, tunnel, and void structures adjusted into a unified configuration that eliminated previous inconsistencies in elevation mapping. For a brief moment, every system connected to the investigation displayed the same final rendering. A single, uninterrupted network. And at its exact center, the fixed point labeled Clara Whitmore began to pulse once. Slowly, like a heartbeat. Then everything stopped. No more movement. No more drift. No more signal anomalies. Just a stable system held in perfect equilibrium beneath the desert. And in that stillness, investigators finally understood the shift that had been occurring from the beginning. They had never been chasing a missing person through empty land. They had been walking through a structure that only became visible once every piece of it was acknowledged at the same time. And now that it had been seen completely, there was nothing left to move. At 9:19 a.m., the silence was not interpreted as relief. It was interpreted as completion. Across Ironwood Canyon, Red Hollow, and every connected subterranean node, all active systems remained online, but no longer transmitted change. Sensors still functioned, cameras still recorded, seismic arrays still listened. But every output had flattened into perfect stability, as if the environment itself had entered a locked state. No fluctuation, no drift, no anomaly, just equilibrium that felt less like safety and more like containment finally sealing from the inside. Field Command attempted manual overrides. Engineers pushed recalibration protocols. Analysts reran diagnostic loops. Every system responded identically. Operational, synchronized, stable, and unresponsive to modification. At 9:27 a.m., a geological survey drone stationed above the Red Hollow Civic Zone captured something unexpected. Beneath the surface, at depths previously mapped as structurally inconsistent, the terrain had reorganized into layered symmetry. Not collapse, not excavation, arrangement. A structure had formed, not built in the conventional sense, not carved, not mined, aligned. The system map rendered it as a continuous lattice beneath the town, extending outward into Ironwood Canyon's underground void network, connecting previously separated geological spaces into a single unified architecture. And at the center, the fixed node remained unchanged. Clara Whitmore. But now the designation had changed slightly. It no longer appeared as a point of origin or reference. It appeared as a designation of state. Active center. At 9:34 a.m., a final transmission originated from the unified system without triggering any detectable broadcast channel. It did not appear in radio logs. It did not register on acoustic sensors. It did not travel through known communication infrastructure. Instead, it manifested simultaneously across all connected displays, as if injected directly into every active interface. The message was simple. You are no longer searching. Field operators attempted to isolate the source. No success. You are witnessing completion. At this point, internal command structure fractured into 3 operational interpretations. One group believed this was psychological manipulation originating from a human actor using advanced signal spoofing techniques. Another believed they were observing an unknown technological system operating beneath the region, possibly autonomous or abandoned infrastructure behaving beyond original design intent. The third group, smaller and unofficial, refused to categorize it at all. They simply stopped using the word actor, because nothing they were observing behaved like a singular entity anymore. At 9:41 a.m., subterranean teams beneath Red Hollow reported a structural shift in the chamber network. Not collapse, not expansion, a reorientation. Corridors that had previously ended in sealed walls now opened into continuous passages. Elevation mismatches resolved themselves without intervention. Junction points that had been disconnected for decades aligned into navigable pathways. One unit reported that their compass readings had reversed polarity. Another reported that their depth indicators no longer corresponded to vertical movement, but to directional flow within the structure itself. And then came the first confirmed visual anomaly. A forward observation unit reached a chamber that matched the exact layout of the central node from system maps. Circular, symmetrical, perfectly proportioned. But this time, it was not empty. In the center stood a recording device. Operational. Recording. No visible power source. No external connection. When approached, the device activated audio playback automatically. A female voice filled the chamber. Clear. Stable. Unwavering. I was not taken, Clara Whitmore said. Pause. I was recorded. The statement caused immediate disruption in interpretation models. Recorded implied observation, not abduction. Documentation, not disappearance. It reframed the entire conceptual structure of the case. The voice continued. You were looking for movement, but nothing moved without being seen first. A pause longer than the others followed. Then, so you were never behind. The audio ended. No further playback occurred. At 9:53 a.m., surface sensors registered a final synchronized event across both Ironwood Canyon and Red Hollow. Every map subsystem reached identical thermal, seismic, and structural readings at the same moment. Zero deviation. Absolute alignment. For the first time since monitoring began, there was no distinction between separate zones of investigation. No canyon system. No town network. No Isla Titanes. Only one continuous structure beneath the desert. And at its center, the fixed node no longer pulsed. It stabilized, not as an active point, but as resolved equilibrium. Field Command attempted one final external verification using satellite imaging. The resulting data did not display collapse, damage, or disappearance. Instead, the desert surface appeared unchanged. Flat, empty, unremarkable. But beneath it, every instrument confirmed the same reality. Everything was still connected,